my home. I promise to keep it healthy and beautiful. I will love the land, the air, the water, and all living creatures. I will be a defender of my planet, united with...
My name is Commissioner Frank Avila, and I'm a commissioner at the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. And today, as my guest, I have Dr. Don O'Hay, and Don said that the name of our show should be Management of what? Of Environmental...
The business of environmental management.
Business of Environment Management. And Don, he received his Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Missouri University, his Master in Civil Engineering from Kansas University, and his Civil Engineering in Doctorate from Northwestern University. So we're talking to the expert because we're going to talk about wetlands. This is our topic today. And Don Hayes is president of the Wetland Initiative, a Chicago-based not-for-profit that is dedicated to restoring the wetland resources of the Midwest to improve water quality, increase wildlife habitat and biodiversity, and reduce flood damage. And you know, this is a good topic considering what's been happening in the last couple months here in the Midwest. All that rain, and the Mississippi is flowing down from, it starts in Bemidji, Minnesota, and it flows all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. And along with the Illinois River, the Plains River, everything flows into the Mississippi.
It's the great river.
Oh, yes. Now, wetlands. First of all, can you explain to the audience what is wetlands?
A wetland has a pretty precise definition, according to the Army Corps of Engineers, who's responsible for regulating and protecting wetlands. A wetland is land that has certain soil characteristics, and those characteristics are formed underwater. They're called hydric soils, and the formation of those soils are accomplished in the absence of oxygen. So most of the materials in that soil are reduced. You would see just iron nodules in the soil. Wetlands have to have hydrophytic plants, and those are plants that love water, such as cattails, lilies, sedges, and the like. So you need a unique set of plants. And then finally, you need water, either above the surface or slightly below the surface a great percentage of the time. And that water has to be there in order for the soils to form and for the plants to grow. So there are three conditions that define wetlands. And
the good Lord made, I believe, made the planet, and He made wetlands. And He made wetlands. What does if we have the Mississippi flowing down, and we have all of our rivers flowing down, and before we had industry and all that built up along the Mississippi with all the levees and the dams that are trying to prevent the flooding, what did wetlands actually do when it was flooding?
Let me describe what that river might have looked like, or let's bring it a little closer to home and talk about the Illinois River.
Illinois River, yeah.
Before, we'll say, Europeans arrived in North America. Okay. That river was very shallow. In fact, at Havana, which is a long way from Chicago downstream, during the summer you could drive a cart, you could drive a horse and buggy across the Illinois River.
On the Illinois River?
It was that shallow.
Yeah.
And it was shallow, broad, and it was lined with wetlands on both sides. Vegetation often covered the entire river, so that the stream started, the Illinois River starts in Wisconsin, flows south past Chicago, then makes sort of a right-hand turn, flows to the middle of Illinois, and then down the center of Illinois. And that river channel 200 years ago looked very different than it does today. It was filled with plants, it was filled with clams and mussels, And those mussels help clean the water. The plants help clean the water. They provided the material upon which the microbial community grew and developed, and those microbes helped clean the water. It was a very clear, clean stream a couple hundred years ago.
That's a couple hundred years ago. Now we're in 2008. And if wetlands, you know, as I mentioned, we had a lot of flooding up here in the Midwest. And wetlands could help address our flooding problems.
The wetlands that once existed in the Mississippi Basin, in the Illinois Basin, could have held all of the floodwaters that occurred over the last few weeks. And in '93, which was also a year of a very large flood, they could have held all of those floodwaters. And unfortunately, we drained them, we filled the wetlands, we blocked water's access to those wetlands by the use of levees, and that is what has caused all of the flood damage.
And the reason why we built the levees was because the land that was used adjacent to the river for farming.
Correct. Or for the development of cities. St. Louis, for example, was built on a floodplain.
About the city of Chicago.
And parts of the city of Chicago. There are communities all up and down the Des Plaines River, which is a tributary to the Illinois, which is a tributary to the Mississippi. All up and down the river, levees were used to either protect farmland or urban development.
And because of all these urban development over the last couple hundred years, we have problems now in flooding. We have problem in keeping our rivers clean.
That's correct.
And this is the biggest problem that we're going to face throughout the world, is how to provide quality water supplies for recreational and for drinking purposes, and for everything.
For our commerce, for commercial purposes, industrial purposes. It's going to be very difficult. The problems that we're seeing here in the United States now, we see all around the world. It starts, just as you indicated, in the headwaters. Chicago is in the headwaters of the Illinois River. And as that water moves downstream, the problems keep compounding. We increase floodwaters, we flood St. Louis, we foul the water in Peoria for drinking purposes. We have to compensate for that. And in the end, we dump it into the ocean, and we are destroying the estuaries, the bays in which these major rivers of the world pour into.
And these are dead zones at the end.
Correct.
Where no aquatic life or anything, no one's living down there.
Well, there is some life, of course. It's just not the life that we want there. The fish that we depend on are chased out by the low dissolved oxygen. The organisms such as shrimp and clams, mussels, can't survive, and on the other hand, they can't move fast enough, so often they are killed. And that's how it became known as a dead zone. And those dead zones ring the United States, they ring Europe, they ring Asia, and they're beginning to develop in Africa as well.
And so if the public could understand the importance of wetlands, and and that's why you wanted the title of our show. What's that? Business of what, Don?
Of environmental management.
Business of environmental management as it relates to the water environment, which is specifically wetlands.
Correct. Well, we think wetlands play a central role in that business. Without wetlands, you don't have flood storage. Without wetlands, you don't have the ability to purify the water as required by us people. And we don't have the ability to provide habitat for the wildlife that we want.
Yes, and we have expensive methods now where we're purifying the water. We have a lot of wastewater plants throughout the United States, throughout the world, which discharge into maybe rivers, streams, and right now we live in America, and we here I live in Chicago, and we follow criteria that is set up by the government, predominantly the United States Environmental Protection Agency. They set up a criteria. They give it to the states to implement them. And so we have to follow the rules, and the way we're implementing it is costing dollars to the taxpayers, because we have to mechanically and chemically treat our wastewater, because at the end it's discharged into the streams and rivers and maybe lakes also. Whereas a wetland might be a little less expensive way to go. And since very few people have much money nowadays, it could help them in their taxes.
Wetlands could save northeastern Illinois,
right?
Chicago, a great deal of money if they were used in conjunction with the existing wastewater treatment plants. If we try to meet the U.S. EPA's proposed criteria for nitrogen and phosphorus, if we try to meet that mechanically, chemically, we first of all are going to have to consume a great deal more energy, and to produce that energy we're going to have to pump carbon dioxide into the atmosphere.
So we may solve one problem in the pollutant end of it, but we're creating another problem in the air.
That's right. And then at your wastewater treatment plants, the treatment of the nutrients will produce a lot more sludge. And that sludge will have to be transported to the land somewhere, and we're going to contaminate the land. So what we feel that if we could integrate wetlands into our waste treatment system, we would save electrical energy, we would prevent carbon dioxide from being pumped into the atmosphere because of that, we would save our land resources because we won't have to have sludge put on the land. We will restore or create a wetland environment which provides for flood storage. It provides for biodiversity and wildlife habitat, recreation, and at the same time, it very effectively removes the nitrogen and phosphorus from the water.
And probably at a lower cost than what we're doing at the district or any other wastewater plants.
That's correct. And we undertook an economic study a couple of years ago and looked at the comparative cost of using wetlands as opposed to conventional wastewater treatment plants, and found that there was about a 65% savings. So to put this in dollars and cents, if it costs the Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago $2.5 billion to upgrade their plants to treat for nitrogen and phosphorus, we could save 65% of that money, and we're talking about $1.6 billion. We're
presently going to upgrade 3 of the largest plants in North America. One is the largest plant in the world at a cost of about 2.3, it could be $3 billion, and we're upgrading it so we could treat it by mechanically and chemically. And so that's what we're doing now. But the wetlands serves a purpose, and it serves a purpose cost-wise, lower cost. Now, if we were to do this here in Illinois, where can we put these restored wetlands? I mean, here in Cook County, it's all built up. We have an urban community. I mean, there is not much land along our waterways because, as you mentioned, the Chicago River flows into the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal. That flows into the Plains River. From the Plains River flows into the Illinois. From the Illinois, it flows into Mississippi. So if we were to restore wetlands, where can we restore it? And to me, it looks like even though we live in the Chicagoland area, we have to consider not regionally, but maybe statewide.
Statewide or watershed.
Watershed-wide, yes.
And I think what we need to do is look at the watershed of the Illinois River and find locations that will best treat the water. And we've done a study of that. We've looked at the opportunities to build wetlands, restore wetlands on the Illinois River. Chicago, the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District's service area covers roughly Cook County, the whole
Yes.
county. To treat all the wastewater from the county, to remove the nutrients, would require about 200,000 acres of new wetlands. There is that amount of land and even more that could be restored that were wetlands 100 years ago and have been converted to farm fields or for other purposes that could be returned to wetlands. Much of that land is downstream. It's south of Peoria. It's in the area where the Illinois River has a very broad, flat floodplain, and today it grows corn and soybeans behind levees,
Behind levees.
where if we open those levees up and let the Illinois River water in, we could grow wetlands, remove the nutrients, save the Water Reclamation District a great deal of money, and could provide income to the landowners, which would be greater than growing corn and soybeans. That would require something around 3 to 4% of the entire watershed area of land to do that, which means that the economic impact as far as farming goes would be pretty small.
And so we're up here in Chicago. There's approximately 10 million people living here in the state of Illinois, and Chicago, the six-county area, must count to about 40% of those people, maybe or more. I know that here in Cook County we have about 5 million people, so that's half. That's almost half of the state here. So if we were to spend our dollars here in Cook County for a project down in Hennepin, let's say, or Peoria, how can we explain to the taxpayer here in Cook County that their taxpayer money is benefiting Cook County?
Well, first of all, that strategy would provide benefits
Yeah.
to the people downstate.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. You know, people downstate always look at people from Chicago as if they're going to be taken advantage of. They're very skittish about, you know, what those people in Chicago are going to do to us next. I don't think it's particularly justified, but they have that attitude.
Sure.
This would, not in a sense, this strategy of restoring wetlands downstate to treat wastewater from Illinois would provide income to the downstate residents, to people who live downstate. It would create very attractive habitat, which people in Chicago will want to go hunting in, they'll want to go fishing in, they'll want to use these lands, and they would be available for use of the lands. Now, to the resident of Cook County and to your ratepayers, they will be advantaged by not having their taxes increased in order to cover the cost of waste treatment. They will save money. About a year ago, J.P. Morgan Chase did an economic study for us, looked at the tax impact of building conventional wastewater treatment to treat the nutrients as opposed to building and restoring wetlands. And there was well over a 50% tax savings.
Tax savings?
Tax savings. So when you go to your ratepayers and you say, now we're going to meet the new nutrient criteria established by the US EPA, and that will mean better environmental conditions for all of us and all the organisms that are dependent on the Illinois River, and it's not going to cost you as much if we had in fact done the same job with concrete and steel. And on top of it, we're going to have these diverse, very attractive landscapes all up and down the Illinois River. Now, to me, that should sell the idea, the concept, the project, and it also should help the Water Reclamation District serve their constituents, their ratepayers.
Now, would we have to get that approved by the US EPA?
In order to undertake the strategy as we've laid it out, we're calling it nutrient farming.
Nutrient farming.
And nutrient farming is simply growing wetlands where we now grow corn and soybeans and using those wetlands to harvest nitrogen and phosphorus. Now, we don't actually pull the nitrogen out and put it into a bushel basket. What we do is we trap the phosphorus in the soil that begins to build up at the bottom of the wetland. And the nitrogen is actually, that's in the water, is actually converted to a gas by the microbes, by the bacteria. They use the oxygen off of the nitrate molecule, which is the form of nitrogen that's in the water. And when they remove that nitrogen from the nitrate molecule, the nitrogen goes off as a gas. So that goes back to the atmosphere. The phosphorus goes into the soil where it started, and the water leaves much cleaner. So we provide a benefit to everyone.
Now, you know, what do restore wetland look like? And I think we have an image, right?
We do.
We do. And if Sherry could bring up that image, you could explain. That's a restore wetland.
Well, if you'll notice in that image that the water appears to be very shallow, and it is. In most wetlands, it's no more than 1.5 foot, maybe.
And there's a wetland on the stream there.
Yes, and that's one of our restored wetlands that we've worked on along the Illinois River. In fact, that wetland is behind a very big levee, and for about 100 years, it was farmed.
It was farmed?
Corn and soybeans.
So the levee prevented the
floodwaters from getting in.
Unless it reached the certain height that it came over the levee.
Well, that's right. Well, it never came over the top.
No,
that levee has never failed. I hope it doesn't for the time being. But water would be brought in from the Illinois River and pass through this marsh.
Through your wetland.
Through the wetland. And that would remove the nitrogen and phosphorus. And this is an example of what one looks like. It's a very attractive landscape. And the wildlife is just amazing.
Now, how large is that?
It's about 2,600 acres.
So if anyone here in Cook County wants to go visit your wetland tours, they could come and see what a wetland looks like.
We would be delighted to have them come to it on Friday and Saturday.
Friday and Saturday.
It is open to the public for fishing.
For fishing?
But all the rest of the time, it is open to anyone that wants to come, and we have some trails. We have an observation tower. During fall migration, starting in September and running up until the water freezes, the migration of waterfowl is just phenomenal.
Now, is there camping nearby if someone wants to come and spend the night, or how?
I suspect there is. I don't know of any camps, but it is close to Starved Rock.
Close to Starved Rock?
Starved Rock has some campgrounds, and of course they have a lodge there.
So your schools that want to take a tour with their students and show a large restored wetland area. And how many acres was that?
About 2,600.
About 2,000. They could come and educate the kids and see what a restored wetland looked like.
Absolutely. And we have a structure on site where they could hold a class, give some instructions, and then they could go to the field. As I mentioned earlier, we have an observation tower that they could actually look over the wetland from. And we have a number of other amenities that they could use. And we would be delighted to have any school group that's interested. Give me a call, and we'll set the tour up.
You know, I remember going to school and working as an engineer. The Army Corps, they're in charge of all the navigable rivers. And they have built levees, they have built dams, but they can never control flooding. Never. I mean, they spend about $156 billion a year on flooding. Why hasn't that been working, Don?
Well, first of all, levees are the wrong structure to be using for flood control. And in 1851, there was an engineer that was retained by Congress to study flooding on the Mississippi, 1850s. And he wrote a report back to Congress, and basically he said, levees will not do the job. And the reason is that levees take away flood storage. When you build a levee along the floodplain, it robs the river of its flood storage. So what happens? The river behind the levees has to build up a little bit higher because there's no storage, and the channel is more narrow, so it takes more energy to push the water through. And as it builds up, it overtops levees or overtops areas, it floods areas that ever flooded before.
And this is what we're seeing now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as the water gets higher, when it overtops the levees, they fail. And of course, we've heard a lot about levee failures in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And a couple of years ago, of course, we had Katrina,
Sure.
where the levees in New Orleans were overtopped.
So by wetlands, we're going to have a lot more of these floods, and to prevent flood damage, this is where the wetlands come into.
That's right.
And that's why it's so important for the public to understand wetlands and to understand how wetlands could help flooding and how wetlands could provide a quality of our streams and our aquatic life in there.
And the public needs to understand that this land is more valuable wet than dry. And in the last 100 years, we believe that it was better dry than wet. And so we've spent an enormous amount of money building levees, drainage ditches, removing the water from the land, making it dry. And in the course of time, though, we began to see the unintended consequences: increased flooding, poor water quality, loss of wildlife, and a decline in biodiversity.
And we could have both. We could have dry land and wetlands. We could have the wetlands where it's beneficial for us, and we could have the dry land where it's also beneficial for us.
Right.
And we unfortunately we think of dry all over. We think of dry land along the river.
Yes.
And we don't understand, or the public doesn't understand, or maybe our government doesn't understand that we do need this wetland to help us out.
We need both.
We need both.
And you make an excellent point. We need both, and we need to make sure that they work together.
Yes.
That there are dry lands. We need to grow corn and soybeans. We need to have our cities and industries, and those need to be reasonably dry.
And people are not going to lose their land.
Right.
They're going to keep their land. They're going to if there's a farmer, he's still going to earn money. Maybe he's not growing crops, corn, soybean, but maybe he's going to earn money by having wetlands, as you mentioned.
Right. Through nutrient farming.
Nutrient farming.
The harvest would be sold to municipal
Sure.
entities like yourself.
Sure.
Be sold to LaSalle, to Peoria.
Because
to
this is what we're seeing now in other type of industry, right? They're selling they're selling credits for
Right.
what carbon dioxide, right?
Water, that's right. Air quality credits in SO2 and in carbon
Right.
are now available, and there is some trading going on in that area.
And it could be the same way in wetlands.
That's right.
And it'll be beneficial for the water environment.
That's right. And it will save the Water Reclamation District money,
Yes.
the ratepayers money.
Ratepayer money, and everyone benefits.
Correct.
We benefit by having water quality. We having benefit.
I will love the land, the air, the water.